Continuing on, in this video we'll add to our knowledge of Excel formulas. Previously we learned AutoSum, AutoAverage, maximum, and minimum functions. Now we want to find a grade percentage for each student. To find a percentage is easy. We want to know the total possible points a student could have if they made a perfect score on all their assignments, quizzes, exams, and projects. To do that, we will sum the total possible points row. And we know we just select Auto Sum, make sure the range is right, and enter. To find the percentage, we divide the total actual points by the total possible points. And we'll put our formula solution in Q7. Again, we're going to divide the total points made by the total possible points. So we begin our formula with the equal sign, and we'll select P7, and there is no divide key on the keyboard. Instead, we use the backslash key. P7 divided by P6 or P5, and select enter. And we see that Anya's final score is an 81%. Now, unlike when we filled down the other formulas, this formula will not work with the fill handle unless we make some changes. And we'll show that by filling down a few of the items. And we see that we have error messages, we have 107%. We know that that's not right. Let's take a look and see why. Remember, when we use our fill handle, we're asking Excel to fill the formula down and adjust the rows appropriately. And looking at our original formula, we had the cell P7 divided by the cell P5. If we look at the first error, we see that it's cell P8 divided by P6. P8 would be correct, but P6 is this text cell, giving us the error. What we'll need to do is to tell Excel to always, absolutely divide by P5 in this formula. So let's clear the values in these cells by highlighting, right-clicking, and clearing the contents. And now let's readjust our original formula to make P5 absolute. And the simplest way to do that is select in the formula bar on the P5 side our function 4 or F4 key on our keyboard. And we'll notice that it puts a $sign in front of the column designation and a $sign in front of the row designation. You could manually put those $signs in as well instead of using the F4 key. We see that it gives us, when we select enter, the same answer. And now when we select our fill handle and fill down to the last student, our final grade percentages now make sense. Now let's move to the grades by weights worksheet. We see that the highest possible grade on each of our gradebook items now is 100. But notice that we see the area where the instructor has put a different weight on each type of gradebook item. You may have seen this in many of your syllabi, where assignments in this case are worth 34% of the grade, quizzes 22%, projects 22%, and exams 22%. And if we total those using our Auto Sum option, we see that the value is 1, or 100%. Now let's see what the difference is between a general average and a weighted average. Let's look at what the students' averages are if they were general and put those in the P column. First, we're going to label general average, and instead of widening the column, let's wrap the text. We'll select the general average cell, and on the home ribbon in the alignment group, we'll select wrap text. It widens the row height and separates the words. Now let's take a look at what Anya's general average would be by selecting Auto Average. Make sure that the range is correct and select Enter. We'll fill down the formulas, and we're going to let Excel do the rounding for us by getting rid of the decimal points. And we do that in the number grouping, and we're going to decrease the decimal places. And now it's visibly showing us what the general averages would be. But notice that in the formula bar itself is still showing a formula, so any calculations that have to do with this column will use the actual decimal points. The decimal point decreasing is just for visual looks. In the next 4 columns, we want to put labels for assignments, quizzes, projects, and exams averages. Let's select the assignments, quizzes, projects, and exams label, copy that, and now we're going to paste it, but this time we want to transpose our paste so it goes across the row instead of down. We'll select cell Q12, right-click, and we'll select the transpose option. And now let's bold those. And now we're ready to see the averages for just the assignments for Anya. Again, we can select our auto average, but instead of using the whole row, we want just the assignments and nothing else. And now select Enter. And we can fill that down, decrease the decimal points, and we'll do the same thing for quizzes. And we can do the same thing for projects. But what about our midterm and our final exams? We can't just drag across because they're separated by our projects. We can still do the auto average, but this time we'll select cell A13, hold our Control key down on our keyboard, and select O13. And now we've got the right range, and notice instead of being separated by a colon, it's separated by commas. And now we'll select Enter and fill down. And we can select all of our numbers in the range of R13 through T34 and decrease the decimal points. And now we're ready to calculate the difference between our weighted grade and our general average. So we've labeled the column, we'll wrap the text, and when it still doesn't fit, we'll widen it out just a little bit. And now we're ready to enter our formula. Let's zoom in a little bit to make it easier to see. We're going to multiply each of our averages to its weight, and we're going to add each of those together. So we'll start with the equal sign, and we have our assignments average times our assignments weight plus our quiz average times the quiz weight plus our projects average times the project's weight plus the exams average times the exam's weight. We do have these backwards, so we can backspace through them and do exams average times the exam's weight. And now we're going to select the enter key and we get the weight. But just as in our previous video where we saw that we needed to keep one cell absolute, this formula won't work when we select our fill handle because our weights, anything in the R column here, are our absolutes. So let's select the formula. And in order to see the formula back in the cell and not work in the formula bar, we'll double click. We're back in the cell so we can amend our formula. And we want to amend so anything that says R3 is absolute. We're going to select the middle of R3 and we can do our F4 key, our function 4 key on our keyboard. The next one that we want to make absolute is the R4, and we can actually enter in the dollar signs if we'd like. So that's dollar in front of the R and dollar sign in front of the 4. And we'll continue doing that with the R5 and the R6. And now when we select enter, we get the same answer, but we're seeing that these cell designations are not going to move. And now we can fill down. And, oops, we missed that last one. And we select them all. And we're going to delete our decimal so that we have a nice round figure. Now let's take a look at what the difference is between the general average and the weighted average. We notice that in Anya's case, her general average would have been a 94, her weighted average a 92. If 90 or above is an A, that's not really a big deal. But let's look down and we find that in Seth's case, his general average was a 90, but his weighted average was an 89. That's a difference between an A and a B. It's necessary to know the difference between a general average and weighted average. And now you're going to complete your assignment directions by completing your grades by points worksheet, your grades by weights worksheet, and submitting your assignment.